Good evening, everybody. Let's call the meeting to order for the Finance and Audit Committee. This is our special meeting for November 28th, and we will begin at 6:03. Can I get roll call, please?
Yes. Okay. Member Roberts is excused, and I believe Martino is excused. Member John Chamberlain?
Here.
Member Richard Beneke?
Here.
Vice Chair Steve Cooley?
Here.
Chair Elaine Morgan?
Here.
Treasurer Sharon Geiser?
Here.
Councilmember Santos?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Carroll?
Here.
Okay.
Okay, and we could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, do we have any adjustments to the agenda? And conflict of interest disclosures? Okay, we'll move on. And do we have any public comment?
Yes, we do.
Okay. We'll open public comment at 6:05.
What time it is, right?
Mike Laura?
Good
Good
evening.
evening, Honorable Chair, members of the committee. I just wanted to explain, I had stepped down after the recent appointment of Councilmember Santos. It would have been illegal for us to have 3 members on council. I had already served, coming to the end of my 2-year term, so I went ahead and decided it would be best if I stepped down. But what I did want to do is come back this evening and just let you know how much I appreciate the dedication and the time that you guys have all put in. It's been a learning experience for me. I've gathered a lot from all of you. And you guys are doing a great job, and I just want you to keep up the good work. And again, thank you for your time and dedication.
Thank you. Any other speakers?
No.
Okay, thank you. We'll close public comment at 6:06. And move on to item number 1 of the agenda, which is our purpose for our meeting this evening, the draft fiscal year 15-16 City of Beaumont audit.
There we go. I'm a little shorter. Well, good evening, members of the committee. I told you at our last meeting that if we had the draft available that we would be calling this meeting. So I'm very happy to have for you the drafted report. We did send it out last week, so I'm hoping that you had plenty of time to at least review through it, go through some of the pages so that you have questions and we can go through those. With us tonight is Brett Van Lant from Van Lant & Van Cannel, who is our auditors for this particular year, fiscal year 16. He's here. He'll be talking to you about the opinion itself, but I can go through the financial reports with you. We can talk a little bit about some of the high points, the numbers, and then if there are any specifics, we'll get into those with your questions. So I will let Brett do his presentation on the opinion, and then we'll talk about a couple of the numbers that you should be aware of that you should understand before we move further. Okay?
Good evening, Milana. Thanks for the introduction. My name is Brett Van Lant. I'm a partner with Van Lant & Van Cannel. We are still in the process of finalizing the audit for the 15-16 fiscal year. I just want to kind of go over our draft audit report at this point. The financial statements are management's financial statements. Our responsibility is to conduct an audit and express an opinion on the financial statements. So, starting off, the financial statements refers to the audit report refers to the different opinion units that are in the financial statements. Second paragraph talks about the responsibilities of management, that these are management's financial statements, and third section of the report talks about the auditor's responsibility, and our responsibility is to express an opinion on these financial statements through the process of conducting our audit. The audit opinion at this point is so there's roughly, let's see, 8 opinion units, and each opinion unit we are required to state an opinion, and so the summary has the summary of our opinions on the financial statements. Just to give you a little idea, unmodified opinion is a clean opinion on the financial statements, and there's 4 different types of opinions that we could issue on a particular financial statement. And unmodified is a clean opinion. There's a qualified opinion, an adverse opinion, and a disclaimer of an opinion on the financial statements. Because there's different opinion units in a governmental agency, it's not like a business where you have one fund or account, and an auditor states an opinion on the entire specific entity. We have different opinion units, so that's why there is a summary of those opinions. And most notably is an adverse opinion for the governmental activities. That's the entity-wide financial statements. That's the governmental operations, so it's non-enterprise operations. So the enterprise funds, which would make up the total of the business type activities, which sewer and transit, those are not part of the governmental activities. Those are part of the business type activities. So currently there's an adverse opinion for the governmental activities, and that is mainly actually solely due to the city not accounting for its infrastructure assets, its capital assets, and an opinion ultimately comes down to auditor's judgment on unmodified, qualified, adverse opinions. And there's kind of a some judgment involved in is it a qualified opinion, is it an adverse opinion, and the adverse opinion is, or I'm sorry, a qualified opinion can be presented if there's a departure from GAAP. So governmental or generally accepted accounting principles require certain financial reporting requirements, and if there's a departure from that and it's material, then we would have a qualification. If it's material and pervasive, then that would require an adverse opinion. An example for your infrastructure and your capital assets, material and pervasive, you have a statement of net position that does not reflect the true GAAP net position of the city. It doesn't have the infrastructure assets. It doesn't have the capital assets presented there, which in a general purpose city is a significant amount of value that is not on the financial statements. In addition to that, you also, as part of your entity-wide governmental activities, you have a statement of activities, which shows the total revenues and expenses of the governmental funds, and this is a full accrual reporting. So you would have expenses in there that have not been capitalized. In other words, your expenses could be significantly overstated. You're also not reporting your depreciation on those assets. So on top of that, you have your statement of net position, statement of activities, and then you also have your notes to financial statements, which do not disclose the detail of these assets, the capital assets, the beginning balances, the additions, deletions, accumulated depreciation. So that's where the pervasive comes in, material and pervasive for an adverse opinion.
Okay.
The rest of the report, so then, then there's the unmodified opinions on the rest of the financial opinion units. And then there's an emphasis of a matter regarding the financial condition of the general fund. It's pretty self-explanatory with regards to the negative fund balance in the general fund as of June 30, 2016. There's a section which talks about a change in accounting principle. This is a GASB statement that was required to be implemented in 2016. Really didn't have any significant effect on the financial statements,
Okay.
but it's reported there. Other sections, it's talking about the required supplementary information, which at this point, it would include the management discussion and analysis, the MD&A. That has not been drafted and included in here. That's prepared by management. So it's kind of a placeholder, if you will, in the report, referring to that, when it's received and reviewed. And then also the supplementary information, which is basically the combining schedules in the back of the financial statements. Because it's we're conducting our audit in accordance with generally accepted government auditing standards. We also are required to issue an internal control report, which that report is still being drafted at this time.
Okay.
However, I can tell you that there was a report last year. Many of the comments and the findings and things would be carried forward again to this year, considering the timing of when those findings were initially found and reported and things like that. So that's kind of the audit report regarding the financial statements. If you have any questions on that or anything else for me, I'd be happy to answer them if I could.
Do we have any questions at this point? Okay.
Not from you, it's from us, right?
Right. Stephen? If there's no questions, we'll go ahead and continue.
Thank you, Brett.
Thank you.
Okay, so to get into the numbers, the report that you have, there are page numbers on the bottom that are typed. When I did this, I didn't have those because that's a function of when Nicole puts it into the system. So when I refer to a page number, it's the ones that are handwritten and are red on the bottom.
Okay.
That way we know what I'm talking about.
Okay.
I know it gets confusing if I don't do that. Okay, so I'm looking at the statement of net position, which is on page 16. And there's just a few line items that I wanted to point out in this. This is, in a regular business terms, this is your balance sheet. So this is your assets, liabilities, and your equity. This is only for governmental activities and our business type activities. And the things to look at here are going to be, if you look at net position, which is about 2/3 of the way down the page, net investment in capital assets. The disclaimer opinion is specifically because of in that first column, that's got a dash and there's no dollar amount. That is something that we recognized right away, and we have been working to get that resolved. We had the inventory of the city's assets performed in May of this year. We have all of that reported back. We're getting it sorted, putting it into a system, assigning values, doing a depreciation analysis, and we also are doing an analysis of the assets that haven't been inventoried, which is specifically land and building and some of the other infrastructure items that we need. Because the inventory is as of June 30, and because we are doing an assessment of assets that existed as of June 30, we're going to have, at least our goal is to have all of that filled in for June 30, 2017. So fingers crossed and everything going as planned, we'll have that hole in our financial statements filled with our next audit. Okay. On page 17, it's a little tough, but pages 17 and 18 really kind of go side by side, but they aren't that way in your copy. So on page 17, about 2/3 of the way down the page, there is a line item that says extraordinary items. Extraordinary items, the dollar amount, of course, is on page 18. On page 18, we have an extraordinary item that adds $62,334,300 to the net position of the city. This is related to two specific items, and they are disclosed on page 66 in the footnotes. The two items, one is State Controller's Office had assessed the city for a secondary loan amount that they had claimed we owed back to them. And they had claimed that really right at the end of us completing the fiscal 15 audit. So we accrued it at that time, even though we didn't agree with it, but that was what they'd come out and said. We accrued it. It was there. Since then, we've been notified, based on other documents we sent to them, that no, we don't owe it. So part of this $62 million is a reversal of the State Controller's Office $4 million assessment. The balance of it is related to the WRCOG settlement, the negotiations for the judgment. Because we had recorded the full judgment at June 30, 15, and previously, that it was there, the problem with legal judgment is when you record that liability, it's based on something that you can put a number with and that you're certain of that dollar amount and that has to be repaid. So it was fully accrued. At June 30, 2016, given that we're doing it now, the situation has changed. Subsequently, that entire judgment has been redone, reevaluated, and part of it, a significant portion, has been released. So as of June 30, 16, if it was June 30, 2016 right now, we would have the full amount. But we have gone past that, and now the reasonable amount that's due for the WRCOG settlement that we know of today, as of June 30, 2016, is only $4,100,000. So the difference has to be added back to our net position, and that's what the extraordinary items are. The other item that's also on these two pages is restatement of net position. And it's below the 62 million. It's the 7,940,000 number that's in the far right column. It's two numbers below. That is also explained on page 69 in footnote 14. When the CFD funds were fully reconciled, when we got through how they had been recorded on the books versus how they should have been reported on the books, it went from two funds. We got it settled into the appropriate four funds. In order to make all of that work, it required a restatement of position to get everything in the right place. So that's what that specifically relates to, is the CFD fund corrections, getting it all split. Okay. On page 19, there's a number right in the middle of the page, advances to other funds. And it's in the middle column, and it's $5,512,580. Either way. That number, it threw me for a loop, just so you know. It took me a moment to recognize what that is. If you look in the first column, just a little further down, you'll see advances from other funds, and there's that number again. That was the negative cash position in the general fund at June 30, 2016, because that negative cash position did not get corrected by the end of June 2016. That's what that number represents. Okay, so that's a biggie. The rest of the statements, I didn't see as much that I felt needed to be pointed out specifically. It's just taking the information that's been presented and pulling it apart just a little bit more so we can see the funds separately a little bit. The proprietary financial statements are page 25 and 26 and 27. Those are just transit and sewer. The transit department, we already saw that audit report earlier because it has to be issued separately and sent to RCTC. So that one is set. And the sewer fund then is the other one that we look at. That's also the fund that we're looking at now consistently with the financial reports to the committee, is the sewer fund, because the numbers there are significant to the city in total. Okay. We have fiduciary funds. They are on pages 28 and 29. I've talked about fiduciary funds before, but those are the funds where the city is acting as an agent on behalf of another person or group. So our fiduciary funds are our agency funds. We bring in cash. The cash is used for specific purpose. It doesn't stay in the city. It needs to move forward. This is where we have the CFD funds, where we have the debt payments, where we have all of the debt related to the bonds. That's in the agency funds. And then we have the successor agency. That is what was the redevelopment agency. It is not gone completely. There are still a few things straggling, and we're still working with the State Controller's Office on some other dangling information, if you will, trying to get some things settled on that before it completely goes away. The next part gets us into the footnotes. The footnotes are lengthy. Sometimes they seem like a lot of burden. Footnote 1 is very long. That's just our general policies. What do we follow in accordance with government standards, with the generally accepted accounting principles? What are we doing and why? Footnote 2 talks about our cash. Cash is cash held in the bank accounts. Reconciled balances, it's the amount that's held in LAIF. Reconciled balance, amounts held with our trustees, which are part of the agency funds. They're all disclosed here. We talk about their fair values. We talk about how they are liquid or not. That's the timing of them, and what they have been classified as far as having a credit rating. And some don't have a credit rating, which includes LAIF. LAIF does not have a credit rating. We also disclose on page 42 those CFDs that we talked about before, with the dual layer of our CFD in 93-1, the way that it has been structured with the two different funds, one basically transferring to the second, and the second one then going out to the market. So this is where we report those bonds at, is $211 million. Let me go to one thing, because I'm pretty sure. That's what I thought. There's a fair market value adjustment that I keep making twice, and I don't know why, but that number, that $211 million, that is going to change in the final version. It'll still be $211 million, but it's going to be $514,415, because I keep doing that adjustment twice. I'm getting rid of the second adjustment so I don't keep doing that. But so that number there on page 42 will change just ever so slightly. Capital assets are disclosed on page 44, but of course all we have are our business type activities there, so you can see how that breaks down: land, building, machinery, equipment, and that. Then we have our long-term liabilities on page 46. This is where I was talking about our WRCOG judgment and how we had to make those adjustments. Those are here in a table where we talk about beginning balance of debt, what our additions for the year were, what our deletions are. That includes, of course, what was taken off because the judgment changed. And also we have the $4 million, and you can see that payable to successor agency, the $4,235,000. That number is the other piece of that extraordinary item in the financial statements. When we look at page 48, and that goes quite a ways, those are all of the CFD bonds. They are the debt without government commitment. Those are the funds where the assessments are made on the properties through the property tax bills. It comes in, we receive it, we put the money in the agency fund. It's used to then pay these debts. So all of these debts are all listed, and they go until page 59. And 59 is where we switch gears and we talk about the pension plan. pension plan is a CalPERS plan, and it follows most of the standards of anyone that participates in the CalPERS plan. One of the things the city does not have is OPEB. We talked about that before as well. So we don't have to worry about large, significant actuarial liabilities for benefits for retired members of the city staff. Page 63, the financial condition and management's plans. This is because we still, at June 30, 2016, have a negative equity, negative cash balance. That's disclosed in the first paragraph, and after that is management's plan. Part of that is right from last year's audit, but it's been updated for things that happened between the two, and also then what we've done since then has also been added. And the June 30, 2017 will have that hole will be filled, so we won't have this particular issue in future years. Footnote number 10 starts with all the commitments and the contingencies. A lot of that has now been removed because we don't have the lengthy things that we had before, but that's where the WRCOG footnote is, as far as what the settlement was, what it is the city has to do, and how it breaks down. So that's a very significant footnote for the commitment of the city for the future. The extraordinary items, which I talked about before, are right on page 66. It's just made up of the two things, nothing more. Then on page 67, subsequent events. This footnote has a significant amount of activity listed because a significant amount of activity happened from June 30, 2016 to this point in time. Tried to catch all the contracts that have been entered into for amounts that we've committed to. We had the restatement of the WRCOG assessment. We had the SEO reversal. We have all of the bonds that got refunded. That's the term, but they really were just refinanced. We have the memorandum of understanding that we have with property owners for the Potrero interchange, and we have the SEC settlement. Now, what was written originally is going to be coming out. That's the big red X, and what's at the bottom is what's going to take its place. It says the same thing, but it's said a little differently, and the attorneys like the bottom one better than what I had, which is fine. And then we have the prior period adjustments on footnote 14, which I also talked about on our statement of activities earlier. Okay. After that, we start getting into supplementary information, things that are required for the pension plan, having the budget versus actual and variances, having all of the different capital project funds, special revenue funds, and our agency funds. All the different components of those are back there. And you see some items in red. I found some things that need to be switched around, and we've talked about them, but we haven't made those changes yet because I wanted this committee to have the opportunity to look at the statements. And if you saw anything else or had any other questions that we needed to address, we could make all those changes at one time. And I'm working on the MD&A, and we will have that along with the internal control letter at our next meeting on December the 11th. The plan is, if it looks good on December 11th, we can make a recommendation to City Council for their meeting on December the 19th. And so that is the plan. And with that, if there are questions on anything in particular that you want to ask, be happy to take those now.
I have one question.
Sure.
The state came in and audited the city and came up with a lot of questions, I guess, that needed answers. Mm-hmm. You know, with regard to policies, procedures, and we worked on that. We looked at a lot of them. We developed a matrix. I mean, we've done a lot. Maybe we're not 100% complete, but we've done a lot. But that was a state audit, primarily policies and procedures. Mm-hmm. This audit, in my mind, is of dollars and cents, not necessarily policies and procedures, although I think the auditor looked at, from what I was reading, some of the policies and procedures got some of the numbers that they were looking at.
Right. There's a whole set of requirements where you have to look at internal controls
Right.
and different segregations. That's how we get the internal control letter, which we'll have at the next meeting.
So I guess my question is, did the auditor preparing this document review any of what the city's been doing, trying to right the ship in terms of moving forward and doing it correctly? I mean, was that looked at all?
I can answer your question. I mean, part of the process, we have to evaluate the city's policies and procedures and various areas as they relate to financial reporting. And so as new policies have been implemented and adopted by the city, we would be evaluating those policies. However, the timing of many of these policies that were implemented and adopted do not necessarily relate to the financial period that we are auditing. So if a policy was adopted subsequent to, or even late in the fiscal year 2016, how the city operated and the procedures that they followed, that's not the period that we would. Those policies were not in place for the period that we were auditing. So, although we can address that, the city has implemented policies and procedures subsequent to our evaluation and reviews, they were not in place for the period that we were auditing. So that's a significant reason why a lot of the findings and recommendations that we had in our previous internal control report will follow up again for the 15-16 fiscal year.
Okay, so there will be in the 15-16, it'll become clearer that the city is moving in the right direction in terms of implementing solid fiscal policy.
Yeah, even in our 2015 internal control report, in many instances we identified that the city has new policies in place, but the period that we are looking at, those policies and so the recommendation is kind of, it's already been implemented, but we've looked at some of the policies, but as far as evaluating the implementation of those policies and procedures, we have not done that because it wasn't pertaining to the period that we were auditing.
Okay, thank you.
Next.
We have public questions.
Okay. If we don't have any other questions here,
I don't, is, guys good?
Actually, I got a couple, but can I put them together and defer till after?
I can open for public comment if you want, and we'll go back to it afterwards.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. We'll open for public comment at 6:35.
Judy Bingham.
Judy Bingham, 115 Minnesota. I've been reading the city's audit since 2010 and even had to sue the city once to get the internal controls report until after the election results were in. This city does not have a very good record when it comes to honest financial statements, and it is no different for 2016. I know the council and staff are anxious to move on and put the city's finances behind them, and they can hardly wait to approve this audit. I haven't even forgotten that the 2014 audit that was never approved by council and still to this day has not been addressed. It just keeps on rolling forward, rolling forward. I guess they are all hoping that everyone will forget about the money and how we taxpayers were cheated. Apparently, Milana Taylor hasn't even closed the June 2016 books because she can't fill in the blanks. Van Lant and Fankhanel and Milana Taylor will be held accountable no matter what assurances this committee has received from those who want to sweep this disaster under the rug. I have given the auditor's representative a copy of my questions. I believe all of you have one. I hope they were all passed out. And I would like to get the answers here tonight while he's here. I don't know if he's coming back for that December 11th meeting, or but I would like for you to answer those here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? We good?
No.
Okay. We'll close public comment at 6:38.
These are the questions.
Okay, well, any other questions? Ready?
Just, one of my notice, and you know I'm big on the whole pension thing. And
You are.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
So on page 38, basically, it specifically cites GASB 75.
Mm-hmm.
And it says the city has chosen not to implement the requirement prior to the June 15, 2017 date. Is that just because this period wasn't captured in the audit, or was that? I know it's optional up to this point.
Right, it's because the standard says that you don't have to yet, so you have to say that you're not going to adopt it early.
Okay.
But we don't have post-employment benefits to report anyway.
Sure, but I noticed that the net potential pension liability was factored in here at some point, or it was shown in here.
Right, for the shortfall or the necessary monies needed for the retirement benefits based on the CalPERS plan.
Okay, not a problem. And then the only other comment, I mean, this is not totally unexpected at all from what I knew of the previous condition. Is there any way on the back end of this, given all the beatdown that the city took on the CFD component of it, that we can put the map, attach a map that would outline the CFDs related to that and
You know,
refinancing?
I can put that in the MD&A because
Okay.
that's the management's analysis and
Okay.
report. So I can put it in there. It doesn't really go with the supplementary information, but I can put it in the MD&A. I can make that a specific section.
Okay.
What are you asking for?
I'm just thinking,
It's a map
since the community
of which
specifically,
areas the
Right.
bonds apply to.
the,
It probably wouldn't be able to go in the MD&A,
Really?
but you could probably add like an other information section.
Oh, okay.
Because MD&A has specific requirements on what's
Right.
allowed to be included. So that if it's not those
Right, it's
items, then
not.
it can't be included in the MD&A. So you can add another information section, basically an unaudited section of the
Right,
financial
'cause you
statements.
wouldn't
that's
review that piece of it.
informational.
Okay.
you see where I'm going with that, especially with all the meetings
Absolutely.
everybody had to have, it would be something to have correlated to the general
Right,
public.
and we can like,
Makes sense, okay.
you know, shadow the ones that are part of that first round that we did. Absolutely.
Okay, that's all I have.
Okay.
Okay.
Question.
Yes.
Okay, I'm not sure if it's intended to be in the MBNA or a supplemental statement or whatever. This report in the notes talks about the city making a significant effort to correct the problems and go forward. Is it possible, or do you intend to have a definitive statement that the city's goal is, or the city anticipates being back on track by June 30, 2017?
It's not specific word for word like that in the management response that's in the footnote for the financial condition. But we can make it a little more clear. You just have to be careful how you word it for that piece because it is part of the audit report.
Exactly.
And if we can then get the fiscal 17 audit rolling right behind that, get that done, then that will automatically then take care of anything that we had where we said that was the intention. We will be there by then. And the internal control report will be quite different when the 17 audit is completed as well.
Yeah, I think if something is being missed here, at least in a lot of the comments that are coming out in social media and whatever, is trying to hold the future management responsible for what past management did, and I would really be happy to see some indication that, yes, we understand there's a problem, and yes, we are fixing it, as opposed to trying to just pull something out of the air to magically make all of those problems disappear. Can't happen, won't happen.
Right, and
Yeah,
if you
but-
look, if you look at page 64 that I marked, I mean, that's really as strong language as we can have in the footnote as far as what management believes is the future conditions. It's those last two little lines that we have
Right.
there.
If we're restricted to that, that's the way it is.
Right.
And perhaps maybe a suggestion to the city council and something to discuss when we have the actuals is some type of a cover letter or a statement that this is what has been reported to our committee is intended and where we expect to be at that point in time, although it's not part of the official statement.
But we now also, we're going to start looking at those monthly reports of financial that's
Oh, yes.
current, and that's all going to
Yes.
play into it, and that will help a great deal as well.
Yes.
You okay?
I'm finished.
Milana
Yes.
and Brett also, you know, this came up when we were first talking to VLF. We knew that there was a great deal of catch-up work that we had to do. And we knew that the assets and the valuation of the assets and proper expensing and depreciation and putting in place those requirements was something that was going to interfere with us being able to go as fast as we would like to go with improving the reporting. So what is your timeline? It doesn't affect this audit, but it affects where we're going, and it affects where we're going for the next audit. So what is your timeline for getting those assets wrapped up properly? Because that really, as I see it anyways, is the core of the problem here with the opinions, that wasn't in place during this window in time.
Right.
And if we don't get it in place and wrapped up properly, it's going to continue to be a foundation problem.
Right. And that's why I was talking about, we had the inventory in May. We're working to put together a list of assets that didn't get inventoried. I mean, it's easy to inventory desks and chairs and computers and, you know, it's harder to inventory traffic signals, street lights, stormwater drains. That part is giving us a little more difficulty, but we are working on getting those. When we can get all of that together and we can get it all into the system and we can give it all fair values, then we'll be able to record it. But the inventory we have is of June 30, 2017, so we'll be able to record it as of that date. It'll just get recorded a bit later, but before that audit begins, it has to be recorded. So I'm working on that. We're working on the street signals. How many do we have? Where are they? What kinds are they? Because different ones will have a different value. Some are older than others. The street lights are the same way. There is a ton of infrastructure that, because it was expensed as they paid for it, there's no way to recapture that easily. So it's going to take some time. Oh, I thought I was walking up
Phone
behind me.
call. Phone call.
Footsteps. So that is definitely something we're trying to put together. We talked about today our GIS, being able to pinpoint, identify street lamps and things like that so that we can get a count. Even if we have a preliminary estimate, that's better than going, oh, I don't know what it is. So we're trying to get that together. And like I said, it has to get done and recorded before they can begin the June 17 audit, and we can't put that off. That still has to get done. So we just have to keep moving as fast as we can.
On that same subject, that report or that inventory, as you're calling that, I'm assuming that's addressing GASB 34.
Correct.
Okay, is that going to address 42 and 51, which is the impairment of those fixed assets and the intangible assets, or is
Yes.
that?
It will be as complete as we can make it. If we have assets that are impaired, we're not going to put them on the books at the value that it probably had when they got it, and we're going to use
The impaired,
Trish.
Right,
Okay.
so that
Yeah.
because it didn't, I mean, if it had been recorded 10 years ago based on the standards
Right.
and how you estimate, then we'd have an impairment now. There's no need to go through the two-layer at this
Correct.
point.
and some of that stuff we can't determine.
Right,
The
we're
auditor
going to
can't
have to,
determine that we can
just going to
determine.
have to value it with the best information we have available.
Okay. And, you know, a good point was brought up when we were talking about making sure that people understand when they read the audit that much has been done. And you were saying there's only so much that you can kind of put in there, and you have to be very careful how you word it, because it is an audit. It's certainly
Right.
not a sales tool. It's an
Right.
audit. And I respect that. But the other thing sometimes I find is people do not always get that it's a particular window in time that this report relates to. And that window in time is not where we are now. And all of what you mentioned about the policies and procedures and everything, that's changed. The internal controls that we mentioned, that's changed. There's many things that have changed. Is there something that can be put in the management response that just at least gives a snapshot so people understand that it's a layman can understand that it's a particular picture of a point in time?
When I do the MD&A.
Because people don't always seem to get that it doesn't
like,
really.
changes in that discussion at the front end of it.
Is it inappropriate or is it all right?
I think there's
I would
a,
have to know
there's a
what
gray
exactly
line
you're
there.
referring to.
Well,
there's a,
Are you talking about internal controls, or are you talking about financial position of the city? Because, like, you know, the financial position of the city
Well, it
is...
actually relates probably more to internal
Yeah,
controls.
so the internal control report, which the draft has not been presented yet and hasn't even been completed at this point. The internal control report from the prior year, each there's I think maybe 4 different types of findings presented. There's significant deficiencies, material weaknesses, there's non-compliance issues, and then there's also other matters that, as auditors, we feel are required to be reported to council. So that report is actually a report directly to council. And included in that report, we'll have findings that we've identified, and our audit standards require us to identify and report, our audit standards require us to identify material weaknesses. As part of our audit process, we may also identify significant deficiencies, and we're also actually required to report material non-compliance. So those things are required to be reported. There's other things that we will identify throughout that process that we also are required to report significant deficiencies as our lower level findings. As part of those findings, each one will have a response from management.
I see.
Each
Okay, good.
individual response.
Yeah, that's true.
Will have, or each individual finding will have a response that management can. Really, you can say whatever you want. It's not audited, and as long as it's not contradictory to what you know we're saying, then you can present it there. But a financial audit report, a financial statement, would not necessarily be the place for that.
Okay.
Okay.
And that report to council is based on this period,
Yeah,
correct?
yeah, that
It's
report-
not anything that's happening in today's world.
Right. So
It's specifically the 2015 up through June 2016.
Right.
Okay,
but the management comments can include things that we've done.
right, that you've done since then to correct.
Correct,
Okay.
and that's what I'm referring to. I've seen plenty of times when the management response is the management recognizes this problem existed in the period of this audit. However, subsequent to that, management has done blah, 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 whatever to fix it. And as long as, you know, it's not
You actually,
contending it happened in the past.
you can include an internal control report as a part of the financial statement itself if you want to. Typically, that's not done, but if you want those responses included as part, that would be the only way that you can include that.
It ends up at the back, the
Yeah,
very
it's
back of the
it's
report.
another other sections.
And when do you expect to have that completed, the internal controls report and the information going to council?
I think the goal is to get the draft of that report ready for the next meeting that you guys are going to have.
Oh, okay, so it's coming relatively soon.
And
Okay.
And that might not include all of the responses from management at that time. Because
Right.
It's a working process as far as.
But
here's-
your
here's our
portion-
findings,
okay.
And then the responses have to come from management.
And I
Okay.
can mark those up, like I did here, things that I noted, things that maybe we need to change or edit or consider. We can do that as well and be part of the discussion with the committee.
Okay.
There's been some question about, there's some 10-year report that's missing from this audit. Have you ever heard of a 10-year report that would have been included as part of this?
No, I'm not sure what that would be.
I know, I don't, do you guys know of any 10-year report that should have been in here?
No, there's nothing in GASB or GAP or anything. that
I know.
No.
I
requires
think
that,
that
is there?
they're thinking of publicly traded companies maybe that have had
That is
problems.
outside of my realm
Go
of
ahead.
understanding, but there is a section in the RSI, requires supplementary information with regards to the pension liabilities that
Yeah,
has.
that was the only one I could find for
You're
10 years.
required to report 10 years of information there, but because GASB 68 was only implemented in the 2015 fiscal year,
Yeah.
you only have 2 years of information to
Yeah,
report.
I-
So it's not prospective, it's
It just is a mistake, I think.
it's
Yeah,
not
okay.
covered. So that's the only 10 years.
That was the only 10-year I could find was pension
There's
related.
also-
And
There's statistical information and a full-blown CAFR. It's a comprehensive annual financial report, which is not required. There's statistical information in there that you're supposed to list 10 years of various information. That's outside of the audit.
Yeah, all right,
We're
thank
not
you.
ready
Brett.
for that yet.
Where did this come from?
This is from Phoebe.
I heard it, Nancy.
Well, she said, where did it come from? And it came from, it wasn't a city document.
It was from an amateur auditor, just so everyone knows.
I did not say that.
I heard what you said.
I said Libby.
Okay, is there any other questions from our side? Okay. What do you need from us at this point this evening?
If there are comments, if you have any other questions, if there's anything that we need to address, if you saw something that maybe you thought needed to be changed, any edits, anything at all, then we'll take that back, and when we get the clean one for our next meeting, get all cleaned up, then we'll take those all into consideration.
And then when is this presented to council?
Well, that depends on this committee. We want to get the internal control report and the MD&A with the corrections made and the full report to this committee at their next meeting, which is December the 11th. And if it all looks good at that time, I would hope that this committee
would
would
recommend
recommend for council their next meeting. Then after that would be December the 19th.
Okay, good. Now, would you, if we see anything in between now and December 11th meeting, would you like us to email those to you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We can do that.
Okay,
We can take a look at it. We can have any discussions. Anyone has a question, we can talk it over. If it results in something that, we definitely need to change or something comes up, then I can make sure that the entire committee is notified of that.
okay, good. Okay, anything else?
I just want to clarify something.
Okay.
I just want to clarify one thing.
Sure.
The chair of the committee asked me where this document came from, and she's pointing to these questions that came from the public. And so I answered the questions. and I didn't editorialize. I answered the question so that the chair would know where the questions came from. I have gone through the questions and made many notes and really examined them, because I think any question that comes from the public needs to be addressed. I do, and I respect any question that comes from the public. And one of the questions I specifically wanted clarified by Brett was the 10-year question, which is in here, actually. So, Mrs. Bingham, I don't want you to think that I was showing any disrespect by answering the chair's question on where the document came from. I don't want anybody to misconstrue that that was not respect for public questions. Thank you.
Yeah, there's no name or anything on it for me to identify what this is from. If I might ask the city manager a policy question, we have several questions that's come from the public in these. Ms. Bingham has turned in one, and there's another one here from Libby. How would you like us to present these answers back to the public? Should we give these to you and have them identified from the city and answers back? I don't think it's appropriate to have a dialogue in our meeting this evening with our auditor, but I think it would be good to get the answers back that we can answer.
Yeah, the process, this is this committee's business meeting. And so
Right.
the questions from the public come to you.
Right.
And you can address those questions as you see fit. Some of these questions are things that we may be able to readily answer now.
Okay.
And so we can kind of walk through, maybe address some of those now, help clarify that. That may be efficient. If there's things that require some additional research, we can go back and look at that and provide a response back.
Okay, so you think it would be okay for us to go through the questions then?
Sure, absolutely. And that's completely, at the discretion of this body, but you certainly, it's appropriate for you to do so.
Okay, because this is the first time I've seen them is this evening, so I've had no time to go through and identify any of this.
We have done that in the past, asked the auditors questions. We have done that before.
Okay, so
Well, there is going to be another,
on
it's
December
going to be
11th.
presented to council. And this is a working document at this point, which is why there's so much renumbering of pages and adding notations. And, one of the things that's always so difficult with a working document and numbers is that we try to give it to the committee enough ahead where you have time to review it. But then again, as we get closer to the actual meeting, there are things that get added. It's kind of a draft version. So the public will also have time to ask questions at the city council meeting too. I don't mean that should modify what you say, but I'm just clarifying that there will be another opportunity also, right?
Yes.
For the public to.
Correct. And you guys are going to see the final report too as we complete that, so we'll come back to y'all as well.
So some of these questions actually may even get answered in the clarification before that final report, right?
True, but you do have a citizen here, with those questions, so it'll be important that they get that response, that Ms. Bingham gets her responses back.
I mean,
Well, he's here right now.
if you want to, what do you think would work well for your finance department to be able to? Do you want to go through them now?
Well, I think it'd be nice to be able to go through them now, and those that we
Okay.
can readily respond, I'd like to be able to respond to
For
those.
the auditor.
Ms.
not
Bingham,
for this
please.
committee.
Okay. So, so the rest of, I actually got these a little bit earlier.
Okay.
So I don't mind going through them, and,
Okay.
we can make sure that the auditor is a resource to answering them. We're
Okay.
not going to be able to answer them.
Is that,
We're not intending to answer them, so.
okay. Then I will let you carry through,
okay.
since
Yeah, sure.
you've
I
got.
mean,
Now, is this
I
the
don't wanna
one
take it
from,
over.
is this the one from Libby, or
Yeah,
is this one from Ms. Bingham?
It's from Libby.
Okay, so that's the multi-page one.
This is, all right, the one that I've got, let me see, I want to make sure it's
Ones
the one
with
you're
a
handing.
question mark behind it.
The one, what is this one here?
This one's from Judy. This is the one
The
she,
one with,
Not hard to figure out, a list of questions.
all right. We can't have this,
What are we looking at? Looking on this 5-page, the
this is the multi-page one.
one that's stapled,
That's the one that,
5 pages?
oh, here it is, okay.
It's a single
Okay.
page, it is a list of questions. That's what I would like for him to answer.
Not let her
Not that
do
hard.
this
Miss
interactive.
Bingham, we have two documents from two citizens. One is yours, one is Libby's. The one that we had ahead of time was Libby's document, or I didn't have it, but
I don't
Miss
have it.
Carol had it early, so she's made some notes on that. So we'll go through that one, since that's one that we had early,
So do you feel,
and we can go through the list of questions that you've given us this evening.
I don't have Libby's.
You have the multi-page one in your hand.
That's Libby's?
That's Libby's.
the one
The single
pager
page
is,
that's
is-
numbered
I don't have
is
hers then.
Miss Bingham's.
I don't have Bingham's.
okay.
Maybe some
Which one is satisfied?
The questions.
No.
I think what Miss Bingham wants is for us to answer her questions. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so I can leave.
Okay.
Okay, is number 13 a question? I hate to start at the bottom, but I don't see any question mark at that.
Oh, answer the first 12. Could you?
I don't know what number 13 is, but,
Okay.
okay. Do you want to go?
No, go ahead.
Number 1 is, do you have a copy of this, Milana?
I do.
Okay. Do you want to answer these? I can just
Sure.
give them to you and you can answer them. And then if we end up needing to do a dialogue, Brett, if you need to clarify anything, please speak up. We're not trying to exclude you from this. Go ahead, Milana.
Sure. Want me to just start at the top?
Just go for it. The one pager,
Okay.
now
got
that
it.
we've clarified that.
Okay, so the first one is, what is accounts receivable? And accounts receivable is the amount that's owed by the citizens for the utility billing and for the trash collection. There is not a specific footnote for that because that's all it is. So there isn't anything special in the guidance that says you have to disclose anything, and I'm not sure what else we would disclose other than that. The second is receivable due from other governments. Those would be remittances from the county, from the state, for funds that we receive 60 days after year end that are for the year that's being audited. So that's part of the accrual process. So if we got a sales tax payment in July, it's due from other governments as of June 30 if it's for the June period. So that's what the due from governments is for. The internal balance, that is not the internal balance. The $5,069,000 is the amount that was still owed back to the capital fund of CFD for the loan that was made in 2013 for the monies that were used to pay off the sewer bond debt. So that's there. That will be removed from the books as of, I believe it was in September of 2016. So it was subsequent to this year end. So for now, it's still reported there, and that gets repaid shortly after year end.
Okay.
Capital assets net of, I'm not going to address that. I'm sorry. Number 6, the Community Facilities District, yes, the bonds, those are part of the agency funds. They are reported as such. Agency funds have assets and liabilities, and that is all that they have. So those numbers have been reported there already. Number 7, the bond reserve, not available within 1 year. Bond reserve not available within 1 year? Page 41. Which one is that one?
Note 2, page 41.
Yeah.
I think there's a no disclosure that talks about the
Oh,
maturities
it's
of
this one.
investments.
Okay.
They're money market mutual funds, so those are, they're not long-term investments. They're basically money market funds. So they have no, extended maturity date over a 1-year period.
Thank you.
Thank you. Then I have 2 million in community services. I'm not sure. I didn't see a $2 million entry. I see things that are close to that, so I'm not sure what the question really is. Is that really the receipts or the expense line item? I'm not sure how to respond to that question for the community services. I have expenses of 3 million, charge for services of 68,000, and operating grants and contributions of almost 3 million. So
Yes,
I don't know what that question is. I'm sorry. Number 9, the reduction of the liability. I've already addressed that question as well. Number 10, the extraordinary item. That also has already been explained here. And number 12 has also already been answered for this committee, that it will be coming at the next meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Milana.
Oh, you're welcome.
And number 13, do you sit in Milana's office?
I do not.
Thank you.
Okay. I think on the other one, my personal thing is on the other multi-page one, unless something, if you have notes already on certain things that you think we can answer at this point. If not, I'd like to submit it to our city manager and let him go.
Can I make a suggestion, Todd? Most of these that I went through, how about if you make sure that when it's presented to council, if there's any questions in here or any problems in here that haven't been resolved, you state that in the staff report when you're presenting the audit? Would that work? Because it's an awful lot to go through, and not that that should deter us. I don't mean that, and I don't want to be quoted on nobody wanted to do work here. It's just that when I went through it, I have notations. Some of the things apply to publicly traded companies. Some of the things are things like the $2 million question for community services is in here. I couldn't find $2 million either. So I think it's the kind of thing that we're not going to be able to go through so slowly right now, but I would like to make sure that there isn't anything in here that
Right.
is a problem with the audit.
Exactly.
Does anybody have a better suggestion on how to do that?
No.
That seems to me that to apply the most intelligence to it and the experts. And, you can actually, you got a copy of this, I believe, emailed to you. So you have seen it. So the auditors do have it. And if there's any questions in here about anything that's improper or unclear or wrongly stated or anything like that, I'd like to make sure that it's addressed by the time this report goes to council. And if there's anything left outstanding and isn't been cleared up with both the auditors and the finance director, make sure that it's in the staff report. Would that work?
Works for
Is
me.
anybody else unhappy with that as a potential
No.
way of addressing it all?
No, but I have a practical concern about committees in general, and getting stuff the day of the committee meeting, especially when it's lengthy and complicated and detailed. I'm not a real quick reader. So Sometimes I don't comprehend things in a timely manner. But if given time, I can do the job. So, I don't know how you prevent that, because people know about a meeting and they put together their stuff, they bring it to the committee meeting, and they expect some kind of response. Sometimes we can give them a response. We can be responsible and do that. And other times we cannot. Let's be realistic, people. Things thrown at you that are very complicated, very detailed, takes time to look at and understand if you're going to be responsible in your duties here on this committee. I'd like this to be brought back with your suggestion for a meeting on the 11th. And anything you see and hear that you think we need to be aware of, that needs to be addressed, I'd like to know about it. And I'm going to take this back and I'm going to go through the whole audit again with these questions in mind as I look through that audit and see if anything needs to be highlighted. And I'm going to raise it as a question at my next meeting. So, our next meeting.
I think we should all, if there's,
I think we all should do it.
we all have an
Yes, we
obligation
all have the
to go
obligation
through
and
this. We do.
responsibility.
I haven't really had time to go through this.
Anyway,
And I just want to make sure that we raise it to an adequate level of response by both the auditors and the finance department. That's-
Exactly.
But I don't think that that relinquishes us from going through it as
No.
part of the committee.
Not at all.
I didn't want to give you extra work there. Hopefully, we'll be able to pay you for that.
If you guys have specific questions you would like to ask me, I'd be more than happy to answer them if I can. You know, if they're very technical and detailed questions, I research things on a daily basis, so I might not be able to give you the exact answer right here, but if, you know, I could provide the answer, you know,
I appreciate it.
in time.
Thank you.
Yeah, in looking through this, some of this has to do with GASB and GAAP and what's required in one type of financial statement and some that's required in another. And absolutely, it's extremely technical and it'll take time.
Yeah. Okay, do we have anything else? No other questions? Okay. Milana, how would you like any questions that come up from the members? Do you want them just emailed directly to you?
Yes, absolutely. Just
Okay.
email them to me. You can also send them to Todd, both of us. We can,
Okay.
if it's something we need to talk about, we will, and we'll get back to whichever committee member. And as I said, if it's something significant, we'll make sure that that information is passed on to all the committee members.
Okay. All right, great. Okay, if there isn't anything else, our next meeting is on December 11th. And if there's no other questions for this evening, we will call the meeting over at 7:16.